All right, another 6 months have passed and the updates are back. But there's not going to be that much for this one because it just didn't happen that much. So this first one that I'm going to be showing you was a total accident for me to find because I was doing some looking into the Blu-ray transfer of the TV series that this item is based on. And when I was typing the name of it into eBay, instead of putting Blu-ray at the end of what I was typing, once I got done with it, it instead put book. And I'm like, what? There was not a book based on this TV show. Oh yeah, there's a book. Yeah, this was a total surprise for me to learn about, but now that I know about it, I'm glad to have it, especially since I was able to get a hardback of this. Yes, this is an ex-library copy, but thankfully there's nothing written on it, so all I had to do was gradually scratch out all of those stickers and then put some tape over it, and then BAM! You never would have known. Sneaky me. Oh, and by the way, this is the updated edition that has an additional chapter for the 10th inning. The regular one has like a whole bunch of baseballs all over the place, but I wanted that extra chapter. Even got my dad a copy of this. Now, these next two things, there wasn't that much reason for me to get them, but since I'm a big fan of this book, and I've been kind of collecting every edition based on it, I figured, well, let's get what's out there, you know. So I got the Costco version of the Star Wars Archives, the original trilogy edition. So what this is that it's a it's taken the 40th edition, which is this edition, though it might say 45th edition for some of you, and then it splits it up into three different books. It just gives you another way of looking at it, but it also shows you a couple of the pictures in a much greater quality. So it's a little bit of a pain to look around if you're doing it like this, but the individual volumes are quite light and are a nice read, though I wish that it came out the other way in here, but that would mean that this is the front thing you're seeing. No, it's just one of those pet peeves of mine, you know. Unfortunately, Costco hasn't put out a equivalent edition for the prequel book, but Target didn't do that with their split volume edition either, and I did actually buy that, but then I ended up getting rid of it because it wasn't a smaller version of this broken down. It was actually a smaller version of, come on, I've got to get something to make these shelves not stick. It was like a smaller version of this broken down. So those books, they felt kind of flimsy, and unlike what I just showed you, they didn't have the Star Wars Archives printed on the front. It just had the episode number across a fairly bland dark blue background, and as I stated, there wasn't an equivalent edition for the prequel books, even though that's the exact same as the 40th/45th edition. So I tossed that Target one. It just didn't feel right when I was rifling through it. Those were pretty good. Hopefully they come out with one for the prequel trilogy. Then this next one is actually arguably even more redundant, but it grew on me the longer I kept flipping through the pages. So I got the picture book for the Star Wars Archives, and note, if you look closely there, it says episodes 1 through 6. So I'm not missing one for the prequels. This has the prequels, though unfortunately it has them in a chronological order rather than a production order, and I prefer production order, honestly, because the original trilogy storyline is much more predictable if you watch it that way versus the prequels, because it'll still have a few surprises there for you. But yeah, there isn't that much to this because it's taking pictures, I'm pretty sure that it's almost exclusively from the 40th edition and then just putting them in here with no text. But again, it just grew on me more and more when I was reading it. Plus, there's a couple of pictures I think that are presented in alternate aspect ratios, because if you have the trade or XXL editions of the prequel bits, you'll know that the area like above my index finger there is cut off from this particular picture. So there might be a few others in there, and like you get approximately 30 pages per movie, so that gives you a decent amount of pages to make some stuff work, even though A New Hope steals some pages from Return of the Jedi. There's also a James Bond picture book that I did own, but then I tossed because it's roughly the same amount of pages as this book. So just under 200 pages for 6 movies gives you about 30 pages per movie. As I said, you could do a decent amount with that amount of space. Just under 200 pages for 25 movies. Once you have one page devoted for all the movie posters, and then another page for cast lists, gives you like 6 or 7 pages per movie. Why even bother at that point, you know? Right, so I tossed that. And then last but not least, I'm going to show you this one first, because it requires a bit of an explanation, even though many of you will know exactly what these are. I got the complete trilogy done by J.W. Winsler for the making of the Star Wars original trilogy. Yeah. On Prime Day, Amazon was offering all of these hardcover things for basically half off, and I'm like, that's a steal. Because now that I'm getting more and more older, if it's a big book like this, you definitely want a hard cover, because it's more likely to preserve the book, and it just handles a little better. Oh yeah, you're a little more likely to get a paper cut, but yeah, because if I had the ability to do things over and get that Calvin and Hobbes complete set again in that big of a size, I would have gone in the hard cover. Luckily, though, there's small paperback options coming out, so perfect in my book. So why do I have these when I've already got these? Well, it's because they're done in a different style, because Paul Duncan in his books, let me get rid of this, I'm too far back. Paul Duncan in his books takes stuff from a whole bunch of interviews and then strings them together in a narrative, whereas J.W. Winsler, he does it in a little bit more of a historical approach, where there is an omnipresent narrator for a decent amount of it. So it's a totally different style. Yes, there's a lot of overlap, but there's new stuff in there too. And come on, you seriously haven't heard the same stories over and over again if you've been a Star Wars fan across the decades? Huh? Trust me, you have. So that was just a nice little additional thing to get. Unfortunately, there's no true equivalent of those books for the prequel trilogy, but there is a sort of trilogy that was done, one book by a different author, that is out there. I'll include links in the description for videos that somebody on here did, so you can see what I'm talking about. That's basically the equivalent that you can get. Also, though, unlike Paul, J.W. Winsler actually did another book for the Indiana Jones movies, but the problem was they did that book right when Crystal Skull was coming out, and they wanted to include bits for Crystal Skull in there, so it had to talk about 4 movies in one book. Meanwhile, if they had left that out and made it just a bit longer, then they could have done the original trilogy in a pretty good way. As such, numerous people have pointed out that while it's nice, it's rather imperfect. Same thing. Check the description for a little more detail. Dude, you forgot about the magazines, even though there's not that many to show. My dad keeps raging about this story. I never read the book growing up, although I should have, because, yeah, in America, they don't teach you anything in school now. I've got zero faith in anyone going for the K-12 thing right now. But it's a nice bit of framework to get your feet wet and refresh your mind if you've forgotten it. They put this out a year early for some reason, but it's a nice little archive that tells you about every movie and TV show out there. Pretty sure it even does the micro series that they did in 03 to 05. This one they didn't put out a year early. I'm glad to have this, a nice little reference guide for the time being, especially since CBS/Paramount has kind of put the franchise on pause while they're revamping it, like almost every franchise seems to be doing these days. Doctor Who, Star Wars, Marvel, DC. Even though Marvel, it's not as bad as I'm making it sound, and DC, well, yeah. Alright, that takes care of the books. See you in the next bit.